Citizens of the universe, it is time for Neutral Lens Podcast episode 2. Another week is in the rearview mirror, and with it we have some topics to discuss. So let's get into it. All right, first up on the docket is I found out my kid is doing drugs. Now what? So the scenario here is this father has a son who is 16 years old. He has found weed in his drawer and has no clue how long he's been doing drugs, has no clue how he's getting the money to buy these drugs. So the question is, should he punish the son severely? Should he be more lenient? Should he take away the drugs? What should he be doing? This is obviously an incredibly shocking moment for parents when they kind of find this stuff out. Very, very not good situation. But you want to, I think most people would just start yelling at their kid once they come home, which I don't think is necessarily the best idea because you want to avoid putting them on the defensive. You want to avoid anything where the kid feels like they're under attack, which they are verbally if you're yelling, or they feel like there is some sort of threat to maybe some of the freedoms that you've been giving them. Maybe certain things that they want to do or are doing that they might fear you're going to take away. So those are the kind of things that, they're going to try and defend that. They're going to try and hit back. And you really want to avoid those situations where the kid just feels like they have to go on the defensive against you because you seem like you're so angry you're about to whatever. So that's what you want to avoid. And honestly, you don't have to confront them right away. Take some time for yourself, calm down, and gather some more information. Let's see, is this a one-time thing? Are they doing this a little bit more regularly? Like, what is going on? And just taking that time to kind of figure that out can help you find the right approach, as well as not feeling so hot-headed when you go into the situation. And like, how do you confront them when you do it at the right time, right? You want to pick a good time. If you go right away, that's not always the best because again, you could be extremely upset and emotional, and that sort of panic and that anger is going to translate to your kid, and they're going to respond in kind. So like, when is he doing something that's not that important to him? So like, if he's a big gamer, then maybe don't interrupt during a game, but pick a time where he's not really doing anything. It could help to where you don't have a family conversation, or if you do, you want to approach it the right way. Like, you don't, again, avoiding defensiveness. If you confront him in front of maybe siblings, his mother as well, you're putting him in a situation where he feels like he's under attack. But if you have a private conversation and he feels more safe to kind of air out his thoughts, then he's going to be more open. He's going to be more honest in that situation, right? So trying to avoid any unnecessary tension when it comes to when you're doing this and what they feel like you're trying to do. And I think the best approach you can have is like the disappointed dad, so to speak, where you're not so angry and you're not having those emotions translate again, right? You don't want to put them on the defensive, but you want them to feel the weight, you want them to feel the gravity of the situation without getting them to close up. So you want them to remain open and just like ask questions, like, hey, I found this. Can we talk about it? Stay calm. And your time to be angry, honestly, is long gone. Like, what happened has already happened, and it is sort of useless to be angry at this point with them. And what you need to be doing is trying to find a way forward, right? Like, how do we quit these drugs? How do we deal with this moving on in the future, rather than focusing on trying to punish them for the past, which, you can do that, but it's not the time right now to be talking about it. And yeah, just poke and prod, So when did he start? How did he get his hands on the weed? Where did he get the money? How long has this been going on? You need answers really from him. You just need him to open up to you and really just tell you what's going on. You want to establish that trust, right? That you're not going to do something crazy. and that he can trust you with this information, and that he knows that you're trying to help him. Because to be honest, I think most people know that drugs are not good for them. They're not doing it because they think it's a great benefit. They're doing it because they did it once, they thought it was cool, and now they're addicted. So you really just you want to put that foot forward where they know that you're trying to help them in this path to where they can quit, or whatever it is. So that's the kind of mindset that you want them to be in. And yes, like I do think some sort of punishment needs to be handed out for this. It's good to sort of say, hey, I understand and I kind of forgive you for these actions, but you still have to drive home the severity situation. You have to have them understand that there's going to be consequences. It's like if someone, gets murdered, for example, even if they, would never do such a thing, but they just hot-headed moment pulled out a gun, then there's going to be a punishment for that. They're going to spend time in prison. So it's a sort of similar thing here. You don't want to go too overboard where you're going to create resentment. Again, you don't want them to hate you for the situation, but you want them to understand the consequences and the severity of what they have just done. So make it not harsh, but like strong, if that makes sense. And find a place where that that they're going to be feeling it and they're going to be regretting their actions, but not so much to where they're going to hate you for doing this to them, if that makes sense. But yeah, like, best of luck. That is not an easy situation to be in. So I hope you find the right solution. Next topic, is talking to myself a bad habit? So I think the real question is, how are you talking to yourself? Are you doing this where it's just an internal dialogue in your head? Are you doing it out loud? Is it just a whisper? How frequent is it? You don't really want to be like Eddie Brock in Venom, where you're just talking to seemingly nobody while walking down the street. I don't think that's a good thing, especially because it can be disturbing to others, But it can be good to talk to yourself, especially if you're just sounding some things out. You know how if you're talking aloud, sometimes it can help you think better, just because actually hearing it versus hearing it in your head gives you a sort of a separate perspective, and you're like, oh wait, what about this? So it can actually help with problem solving. It can help with a lot of things, which is why you see a lot of people, they start talking to themselves, start talking out loud about the steps that they're taking when they're troubleshooting or things like that, because it just helps to actually definitively say it. Like the idea of actually saying it or turning something into reality in that sense makes it more definitive. I'll give you a good example is when I'm listening to melodies in my head, when I'm just making music. I'll make some music as a hobby on the side. If I'm just listening to it in my head, it'll always sound good. Like any melody, any note, they all sound great. Okay, there's some exceptions to that, obviously, but if I then go to a piano or to a music software and input it and then listen back to it, most of the time it does not actually sound that good, especially when you start layering in chords and adding other stuff to it. It doesn't sound that good anymore. And it's because, in your head, you have this really false sense, I guess, is how to describe it. But things just are a little bit murky, a little bit muddy in there. And you don't quite get the sense of it because it didn't pass through one of your five senses. I'm not sure how to describe it, but I know it's sort of like a phenomenon that happens with a lot of people in a lot of different places. So that's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, like I don't think that talking to yourself is a bad thing. I think it can be a very good thing, as long as you're not sort of disturbing others, right? That becomes the big question is, are you doing in a way where you're really pissing off other people? Because if it's just a thing where, maybe you live alone and you just talk to yourself, that's totally fine. It's totally fine. But are you in like a workplace where it can be pretty quiet and you're not even whispering, you're just straight up talking to yourself? Maybe even it's just a conversation because you're bored or something. That can become an issue because you are actively disturbing other people. They're like, what the hell is this guy saying? So that's something that you have to watch out for. But as long as you're not in a situation where that is going to happen, like, if you're just trying to work out a problem, if you are just, kind of bored on your own, or in some place where you're really not going to disturb other people, you're just whispering, then talking to yourself can help a lot, especially when you're deep in thought, right? Like if you are really thinking deeply about something, just talking aloud, sounding it out, working through your problems out loud rather than in your head, that can actually help you go a lot deeper. So it can be good, can be bad. It just depends on what you're doing, how you're doing it. All right, last topic is, when do other people's opinions matter? Because I've met way too many people who either care about what no one says or care about what everyone says. And, the answer is obviously somewhere in between, but where do you sort of draw that line? Let's just start with, is it always beneficial to listen to what others think or to listen to what others have to say? No, especially if you're in a situation where it's like, maybe you're a content creator or you're some sort of celebrity, you're getting feedback. There's just going to be haters, there's going to be trolls, and you don't even have to consider them. But if you're like a business owner, or you make some product and you want feedback on that product, then you don't actually have to listen to everything that everyone says, because a lot of it is subjective. Maybe someone's feedback is, I personally don't use it this way. But just because that's one person's feedback doesn't mean that that feature or that product is bad. It just means that they are not taking full advantage of it. So you have to, really dive in and see, is this something that we want to keep? Is there something that we have to change based on how we intend for it to be used, how we know people are going to use it? And you can't just base it off of like, okay, one person said this, so we're going to get rid of it entirely. I don't think that's a good idea. And you want to listen to people who genuinely have an interest in helping you, in the sense that, like, if you can tell that they're offering constructive criticism because they want you to succeed, then those are the people that you can listen to more, versus people who are just out to criticize you because they maybe had a bad experience, or they don't like you, they don't like what you're doing, whatever it may be. Those are the people who are like, you don't really have to listen to them, because they're going to be so negatively biased towards you that even something that is good, they can turn to something bad just because they don't like you. So, finding the people who look at it more objectively and say, hey, I like this, I don't like this, based off of, just experience and, seeing what you're like, seeing what your product's like, whatever it may be, to actually provide constructive feedback. Those are the people that you're going to listen to. And just because you listen to them doesn't mean you have to oblige. Just because you hear them out doesn't mean you have to implement everything they say. Like, that's the other thing too, right? Like, I would say that when I get feedback on certain things, I probably listen to about 5% of it, just because a lot of it can come from people who aren't as familiar as you are, or they just offer a suggestion and you simply don't agree. So it's ultimately up to you, so you don't have to do everything they say, but that doesn't mean you can just, all right, I don't like what this person said, they said they don't like my product, I'm going to ignore them. That's not how you want to do it. But you really have to just think about it. Is this something that they have a lot of experience in? If they're not an expert and you are an expert, potentially they're just speaking from a completely different perspective, and they just don't know what they're talking about. But it could still be useful, right? Because your average consumer of whatever it is that you're making, maybe it's music, maybe it's a certain product, they don't know. They're not an expert. So what is the end user experience going to be? So that can still be useful information. You just need to know how to use it, so to speak. Where maybe they don't really give good advice when it comes to this specific thing that they're talking about, but it gives you an idea about something else. Like, hey, I don't agree with them on this, but it kind of gives me an idea about how to change something else that could also affect that experience, they don't really notice it nor mention it, but I know it will affect that experience, so I'm going to change something else based on their feedback. That can also happen too, So you really have to deep dive and think about it and analyze, do you agree with it? Do you see something else that could be impacted by it? What is their perspective? Are they genuinely trying to help? And do they actually have enough credibility to where you trust in what they're saying and they're not just sort of blindly saying it? But then also considering the end user, quote unquote, aspect of non-experts can give some really useful feedback, because that's what the average person is going to experience. All right. Yeah, that will be it for episode 2. Again, if you guys have questions you want answered, you want any topics to be discussed, then feel free to send it Neutral Lens Pod on all social medias. So yeah, that'll wrap up episode 2. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.